Welcome to Forward Thinking, because the world is moving fast. The world of health insurance also needs to. I'm Adam Saville, Chief Editor for Vitality, and I'm here with Nick Lipczynski, Managing Director of IHC, Dr. Katie Tryon, our Commercial Director for Vitality, and Athos Rojovic, who's our Distribution Director for Vitality Health. With 1 in 2 people being diagnosed with cancer in the UK, it's no wonder that people take out health insurance with cancer in mind. So as people's needs have changed, we've seen the PMI proposition have to evolve. So today we're going to be putting the spotlight on cancer before, during and after claim. On the agenda today, I'll soon hand over to Aranthea Garajan, Vitality Health CEO, to touch on how PMI is evolving for cancer. We have a panel discussion exploring the health insurance market today. Then we'll be joined by a very special guest, Nicky, a Vitality member who's been through a breast cancer claim with Vitality. Then we'll turn to a live Q&A, so please remember to get your questions in. But to kick things off, I'd now like to hand over to Aranthea Garajan, our CEO for Vitality Health, who's going to give us a quick overview of how the health insurance product is expanding.
Thanks, Adam. As PMI products have expanded, so too has the full breadth of support available for cancer patients. Here are 3 ways in which PMI is evolving to offer comprehensive cancer care before, during, and after treatment. Firstly, prevention. Playing a more active role in preventing cancer before it arises has never been more needed. Did you know, for example, that by addressing modifiable lifestyle risks like smoking, obesity, lack of exercise, and unhealthy diets, as many as 40% of all cancer cases can be prevented? By promoting and incentivizing people to adopt healthier habits through measures like the Vitality Programme, we can make a big difference to people's lives. Where lifestyle health risks are identified, appropriate personalized health recommendations are also changing the way people manage these risks. Number 2, early intervention. As with any illness, detecting cancer as early as possible is also key to improving treatment outcomes. Vitality's online cancer risk assessment service is a good example of how PMI plans are expanding in this area. Members who are identified as being at risk are offered access to discounted screenings for breast, bowel, cervical, prostate, and skin cancer, enabling an earlier diagnosis. It's also worth highlighting annual health checks, which offer a more in-depth assessment across a broader range of health metrics. Last but not least, but too often overlooked, but broadly known as prehab, preparing someone for cancer treatment and giving them lifestyle support during it can be as vital as the treatment itself. This is about treating the whole person, not just the condition. A great example of this in action is Vitality's dedicated cancer support program. This gives members who are going through chemotherapy access to specialist, dedicated case management and tailored lifestyle coaching to manage any treatment side effects. Patients enrolled in the program between 2023 and 2024 saw a 30% increase in physical activity, a 23% reduction in stress, and a 12% improvement in the quality of life. As you will hear from Nicky, a Vitality member later on, this sort of support, along with a healthy lifestyle, can make all the difference when it comes to the chances of a positive outcome. With Vitality, members going through a cancer claim are fully supported by an experienced team of experts who can talk them through their options and help them get their most from their plan. It is for this reason we offer dedicated care consultants who will be the members' designated contact for the entire duration of each individual claim throughout their cancer treatment. Over to you, Adam.
Thanks, Aaron. So as we've just heard, PMI is providing much more than just treatment before, during and after claim. So before we get into the details of what that means for intermediaries, what that means for distributors and insurers themselves, Dr. Katie Tryon, please could you give us, from a clinical perspective, a quick overview of the healthcare landscape for cancer today?
I mean, needless to say, we are still looking in a slightly bleak direction with cancer. You know, we've got 3.5 million people in the UK living with cancer, We've got about 350,000 new diagnoses per year. And both of those things are increasing, right? The prevalence is increasing, survival is increasing, which means we have more people kind of then living with cancer going forwards. In terms of provision, we're still really struggling to meet that need. So many people will have heard last year that the 2-week wait for cancer has been abolished, but we still have the 62-day target from referral to actually receiving treatment. But we're nowhere near making that. So we haven't actually met that target since 2015. So over 10 years ago now was when we last met that target. In that time, about 500,000 people haven't actually been able to achieve that target. And as we know, unfortunately, with every delay comes poorer survival. So I think, there are some really bleak statistics that continue with cancer, and there's a lot of improvement still to do. We're also, unfortunately, many people will have seen the news last year that actually we're seeing a very fast increase in younger age cancers. So globally, we were about 79% increase since the 90s in under 50-year-old cancers. But actually, a lot of people said, well, it's to do with reporting and how we're diagnosing it. But in the UK alone, it's a 22% increase. So there is a real issue with also younger cancers. And I think we can talk about it probably as we carry on around things like lifestyle factors, environmental factors, and a lot of the different factors that play into that. But we're certainly seeing an unfortunate increase across the board, but particularly in those younger age groups.
Yeah, and we know that the UK isn't getting healthier. Right, and we're seeing obesity on the rise, with 2/3 of the UK population living with obesity or being overweight, and there's a huge connection between that and cancer incidences. Yeah.
So I think what's been very well publicised in terms of behaviour are things like the association between lung cancer and smoking. I think what is increasingly being revealed and needs to be publicised is the link between weight and cancers. So they're estimating that about 10% of breast cancer in postmenopausal women is accounted for by weight, and about 10% of bowel cancers are attributable to weight as well. And an interesting but devastating fact, in postmenopausal women, a 5-point increase in your BMI increases your risk of breast cancer by about 12%. So these are really significant associations. So you've got the association with weight, you've got dietary associations. I mean, for a long time, particularly in bowel cancer, we've known that the link with, obviously improvement in bowel cancer incidence through things like fibre intake, but obviously the reverse when it comes to things like processed meats. So those lifestyle changes like improving your diet, physical activity, weight loss are incredibly important when it comes to cancer.
And we're talking about kind of making sure that people are mobile, going out and getting their steps as opposed to actually having to kind of like run marathons, right? We're talking about small incremental changes can make a big difference.
Absolutely. I mean, others who may have seen our discussion on the habit index will have seen some of the research that we showed in terms of every increment in terms of things like increasing your steps helps in mortality rates. There's no golden number. Small increments make a really, really big difference.
Right, yeah, and I think that point about young people is a very interesting one. And Athos, I'm going to turn to you now. So we saw in some research recently that actually people more than ever are expecting to use their health insurance. So we saw that 73% of health insurance customers report using their cover in the past 12 months, with even a higher percentage of that, 86% of that falling within the 18 to 34-year-old brackets. And actually what we're seeing is now people are more than ever expecting to use their PMI, and especially amongst the younger population. There's almost a value issue here, isn't there, where people are trying to, or expecting to use it as utilisation has increased because people's needs have changed. So how is the PMI proposition evolving?
Adam, I think before answering that question, I'd like to just loop back to what Katie was saying and speak for a moment about the importance of screenings, particularly when it comes to the prevalence of cancer in young people. And almost the only way that young people can have access to preventative screenings is through private medical insurers. So not just our standard screenings, but our advanced screenings through Check for Cancer and such like, I think are so important. And the ignoral of symptoms is just something that we at all costs should avoid. So I just wanted to make the point that screenings absolutely would be associated with an increase in incidence rates, but also an increase in the ability to early intervene and treat properly. To answer your question, though, I think that there's no doubt that the difficulties facing the NHS are playing out in the expectation of consumers. And I don't think that's a Vitality-specific issue. I think it's an industry issue. And I think that all of our peer group is facing exactly the same set of challenges. So what we're now seeing is a bimodal distribution of usage of PMI, with primary care now making up a massive volume of usage, and particularly by younger people. And I think there's a different debate to be had about generational expectations of what provision should look like. But it's certainly playing out in the way we're seeing people, the reasons for buying PMI have changed. We're not now looking to queue jumping or massive cost mitigation. We're looking to access. And I think that that's a massive change, and one that we as providers need to be not only cognizant of, but moving on really quickly.
And there's two things happening there, isn't there, Athos? There's increased utilisation and increased medical inflation, right, with costs going across the board upwards, right? So from an intermediary perspective, Nick, in your line of work, the business that you run at IHC, how are these things impacting the conversations that your teams are having with clients, given that there's now an expectation they're going to use their proposition, but at the same time, there's the kind of that buying conversation is obviously going to have changed?
Yeah, there is a real challenge in that. I see two sides of it. It's incredibly rewarding to be sitting with a corporate client talking about something that we know is having a profound impact on people's lives, survival rates, etc. And that's the enjoyable side of the business. The downside is this is all leading to an increase in costs, and we've talked about increase in incidence. And I think the industry needs to be aware that the initiatives that particularly Vitality are pursuing are medium, longer term solutions. In the short term, we have to be careful with the corporate market because this is having a profound impact on cost.
What are the mechanisms in place in making sure that those costs are contained so that you can still deliver as an insurer the levels that are expected that are going to make a meaningful impact on a patient's life? How do you kind of balance that?
Yeah. I mean, we've already talked about first you want to hit incidence, right? So you want to do all of your prevention work that you possibly can and see if you can hit incidence. Then I think the key piece is hitting staging, right? Which Athos alluded to, which is, can we pick these up earlier, right? When we talk about a lot of the high cost treatments, these are coming in late, and actually if you look at survival differentials, so if you take breast cancer alone, your survival at stage 1, 2 is 95%. If you're looking at a stage 4, you're looking at 30 or less percent, right? So then you're in this issue of you're also paying hugely for late stage cancers, and actually survival and outcomes are really poor. So can you get there earlier? So I think that's then the next stage. Then the third step is, can you actually help and guide people and navigate through treatment appropriately? And I think that's the big piece that comes to what we were talking about. So if you are going, whatever stage you've come into the system, can we get you to the right care at the right time that is going to be most effective? And can we really effectively evaluate the outcomes we're expecting from that treatment? So I think particularly at these high-end treatments that we're talking about, a lot of work is going in to evaluate what is the outcome you're expecting for that, and is the financial kind of burden worth the outcome? And and I think that is a really open and honest conversation that we have to have with a lot of these treatments. And increasingly, insurance companies are opening up to have those conversations.
And Athos, I mean, that sounds like to me like shared value in action, right? At those three stages, kind of prevention through to earlier intervention and support during a claim and beyond. I mean, at every point of that journey, we're looking at shared value here, making sure that we're giving as much value in a way that actually benefits the proposition and the insurer too.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that value is an interesting concept. So what is value to whom? Interestingly, Katie was speaking about causality earlier, and we know that exercise, diet, alcohol, and cigarette smoking are all directly causally linked to cancer in some way or another. So the ability for us to get there right at the very beginning and say, if you make smarter choices around your health, and we can inform you of where you are and advise you in terms of what your next best action is, and thereby reducing the impact financially to us as an organization in terms of claims drain, we can then take the surplus and feed it back into the rewards program and allow us to fund more, but also do things like champneys, do things like the care that we're able to wrap around, specifically in cancer. So it is shared value in action, but it's also talks to the science of how behavior change impacts health outcomes and claims experience.
I think one of the big things that we're really trying to address also as an industry is longevity of claim. And that's a really significant, wonderful issue to have, which is because of survivorship, these claims are going on for a lot longer. And we're really having to think about, I mean, to Athos's point, how do you then re-engage people in a health and well-being journey that is appropriate for someone within a survivor cancership model, to ensure that actually that it can, end up a long tail cancer claim is, again, within that shared value kind of infrastructure. And I think that's something as an industry we are moving at pace to address, because that is something that, historically wasn't necessarily part of the discussion.
And Katie, how is technology sort of kind of playing a role here, or has potential to unlock more streamlined access to care, AI being an opportunity to take and data mine and all these different things? Is that something that can help alleviate some of the cost pressures?
There is, at the treatment end, significant advances, whether it comes to chemotherapy, radiotherapy, etc. But I think also up front in screening, we're seeing some really interesting changes. So I think, two of the big changes I see coming down the road. I mean, one is everyone, I'm sure, saw last year a lot of publicity about prostate screening, because for a long time we've been waiting for an effective prostate screen. PSA goes in and out of favour depending on how people feel, but has significant issues with false positives, false negatives, etc. But now there is a big trial ongoing in terms of what is the balance of PSA with MRI scanning and with potentially genetic analysis as well. The government's significantly invested in seeing that through to see if there are some advances there. And then the other one that I think is ever increasing in its sophistication is around particularly skin analytics. So, the way in which we're using AI for screening tools for skin issues, I think is a very interesting technology to watch. And as I'm sure everybody knows, we have a partnership with Skin Analytics, where, we, on GP referral, offer a dermoscope for review of those skin lesions. And that is just the start of where you can go with some of this to really make sure that we're getting people to the right care at the right time. And back to the earlier point, how can we get these identified as early as possible? Because, some of the late stage, particularly melanoma treatments, are extremely expensive.
I'd like to just make one more point around technology and the use of technology. We've invested a lot of time and money and energy into creating digital pathways. I think it's very important to note, though, that we absolutely offer channel of choice pathways for our claimants, and particularly when it comes to cancer, and people are frightened and they're nervous and they're unsure, the ability to talk to somebody on a telephone who's a specialist in the area and is able to guide and coach and direct people is critical. So I just wouldn't want that to be lost in the discussion, that we do have this wraparound approach to cancer care, where it's both digital, if that's appropriate for the claimant or the member, and voice where that's more appropriate.
And as fascinating as all of this is, I think we're speaking about a claimant here in quite an abstract way, but I think this is really brought to life by someone's real life experience, right? And we are lucky enough to have Nicky with us today, who will be joining us in just a moment. Nicky went through a breast cancer claim with Vitality last year. I'm pleased to say she's on the road to recovery and in remission, but she'll be joining us today to talk to us about her experience. Before she joins us, I'd like to show you a quick video to give you an idea of the journey she's been on. Before I do, please remember to get your questions in. We will have some time to answer those towards the end. But for now, let's enjoy Nicky's story before we welcome her to join us here.
I was at a friend's house and I noticed a lump. The doctor just said, I'm sure it's nothing, but I'd made an appointment with Vitality in the afternoon, and the consultant sort of examined me, and from day one he said, it is highly likely it's cancer. It was a real shock. You know, I was really fit, really healthy, really looked after myself. You just feel completely numb. It was my first experience really of a big claim with Vitality, and it was seamless. There was no stress involved, no worry, no anxiety, no waiting. You know, I had my results, I knew what was going to happen next. And from the first stage of being diagnosed, I got a lovely gift in the post from Vitality, a really lovely box with a comfort blanket in it, a water bottle and a notepad. Then almost immediately I was phoned by a customer support person at Vitality who became my personal support throughout the whole journey. It's a situation where you can't control anything, but I didn't have to worry. I felt like I'd been wrapped in cotton wool from the very beginning with Vitality. Not my best look. So this is me in the chemo unit at the Genesis Clinic with my cold cap on. I think you just have to laugh, don't you, and make the best of the situation. Fitness was a big part of my life before my diagnosis, but it became even more important. Through Vitality, I had personal training once a week. I had access to reflexology, acupuncture. I tried to do mindfulness. I had the Headspace app. You get that as part of your Vitality package. I gave up alcohol. I was more mindful about what I put in my body. It was the end of my treatment. I had a call from my personal contact at Vitality, and she said to me, there's just one other thing with Vitality, is you get to go to Champneys. Last week I had my annual mammogram and was given the all clear. To actually hear your consultant say it's all gone is amazing. I try not to worry about things as much as I maybe worried before, and just live in the moment. Yeah, I walk the dog and I look up at the sky and just realise life's good.
Wow, that was quite something. And Nicky, it really is like having a celebrity in the Vitality offices. I've watched that video 100 times now, being involved with its creation, but it still gets me every time. Most importantly though, first of all, thank you for joining us today. And also, how are you?
Yeah, I'm absolutely fine, really good. I had a clear mammogram last October, so I'm feeling really, really, really well.
And how do you feel watching that back again?
It's such a journey. I look at that and I still can't believe it was me that went through that. Out of all my friends, I was the fittest, the healthiest, and was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2023. So.
And it goes to show, that kind of cancer can't always be prevented, but the choices that you made, the steps that you took, the way you lived your life throughout your diagnosis, I personally think is a real inspiration. But it really did make a difference.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have a choice. You know, you can't control your diagnosis, you can't control the treatment that you're going to have, but there's a lot of steps that you can take to make it easier and control how you react. And I made quite a lot of lifestyle changes. But this was all sort of kicked off really with Vitality, because I had the call right in the beginning about nutrition, about my mental health. So it made me sit back and evaluate, what am I going to do here? How am I going to handle this? So I had a very strict regime. I would have my chemo. I had 16 chemos. I'd come home from my chemo feeling pretty awful, get straight in the house, get the dog, go out for a walk with the dog, get my 2-litre water bottle every day, make sure I drank lots of water, and try to eat as healthy as I possibly could. I went to the Genesis Clinic in Milton Keynes, so I was really lucky to have that on my doorstep. So again, you know, before I even get there, we don't have to worry about parking. A very small team, so I knew all the chemo team, all the radiotherapy team. I had personal training once a week. I had reflexology, acupuncture, all things to support me through my journey that made a big, big difference. And all their research shows that if you are physically active, you respond better to the treatment, you come out of it the other side quicker. So that all really helped.
But Nicky, on that, around sort of the kind of the little things, what kind of strikes me about what you just said there actually is that obviously something like chemotherapy is such a massive thing to go through. But what I'm hearing from you is that some of those things that we would perceive to be little things, like taking the dog for a walk, things like acupuncture, doing some headspace, all of those can build up to create a bigger picture that was hugely beneficial to you during your treatment. Is that the right way to put it?
I mean, one of the biggest battles with any cancer treatment is a mental battle. So you have to try and be as positive as you possibly can. And just little things can make such a difference. And I think don't look at the bigger picture. Just take it's too overwhelming to look at the whole cancer chemo treatment programme. So if you can just take it one step at a time and just focus on the small things, like walking the dog. You know, it's amazing to get out in the fresh air, hug a few trees. You know, I took a very holistic approach, and I think that really helped with me going through the treatment and post-treatment recovery.
Yeah, now here you are. Telling your story.
Yeah.
I want to kind of turn to the panel and get some reflections. Nick, from your side, it really brings it to life, doesn't it, hearing from Nicky firsthand?
It does, and as I said, part of my job is rewarding and being able to talk to clients about this. But I think sometimes what we miss, again, as an industry, is the data I present to clients is anonymised, faceless data that talks about you've had 3 cancer claims. People don't really understand what it means unless you can bring it into the real world, until you can understand what Nicky's been through and how she's come through the other side. And I think that is, as an industry, where we're lacking some of that. We don't bring it to life, we don't make it real. We look at data, we look at premiums, we look at increases. We need to do more about that. And that in itself would increase the value to individuals, the perceived value they have of why they have this. And this also then will help me in talking to corporate clients about selling in the premiums, the increases, whatever, because it's bringing it to life. And as soon as you do that, we have clients just go, I'm so pleased we had that, because I know what we've been able to do for an individual's life, and they're here with us and they're still working for us and they're fit and they're healthy, etc. So everything you hear from Nicky is lovely to hear, not just the story, but the way you can bring everything to life and make it relevant to clients.
And you can feel it, can't you, in the room, right?
Oh,
Before
yes.
we were talking about medical inflation, cancer incidences, data.
What does it mean unless you have a real story?
You hear from Nicky firsthand, you watch that video, and our body language is different. The way we're speaking, the language you're using, it's more human.
2 things I really wanted to pick up on this was also around, we did talk earlier about things like cancer waiting times, and I think it's very easy conceptually to talk about 62 days. I mean, 2 months
That would have been horrendous.
is a
for me.
really long
Horrendous.
time to wait.
To worry and wait.
To worry and wait, and I think we can talk about cancer outcomes and we can talk about the impact it has on treatment, but you can also just think about the human element of sitting there for 2 months waiting. And I think that's something that I think really came to me in this, is every day counts when you're having to wait like that, and I think that's really important. And then I think it is around these, I think we talk very conceptually about treatment pathways that people go through and the cost of treatment pathways, but just picking up on what you said, things like parking's easy, or you can call your consultant, and you sort of forget that everyone's living their real life. It's the same as when you go shopping, you need to find parking. You need to find parking where you're going to have your chemotherapy, And it's these sorts of things that I think have really been brought to life through this story, of really thinking about what does it actually feel like to be doing that every day.
There's so much in there that we don't often talk a lot about, right? It's the preventative prehab, it's often referred to as, things you can do during treatment. It's almost counterintuitive, isn't it? And obviously if someone's going through chemotherapy, we're not saying go out for a jog if you're feeling really, really awful. But having said that, there's a lot of medical science and there's a lot of research through our partner Alvi as well, a lot of expertise around how these things, as Nicky said, physical activity can really help with your potential outcome.
Well, I think there are, Nicky was such a sort of fit and healthy person beforehand, but I think, it's so important both in your treatment response, in how you support both your physical and mental well-being. I completely agree with that. Actually going for a walk with a dog is going to have as much impact on your mental well-being as it is on your physical well-being. But thinking about what you do through the journey so that you can get maximal impact from the treatment you're receiving, but then also setting up those habits because we were talking about, it's wonderful. People are getting through their treatment. They, have wonderful outcomes from it. And actually, if you can really set up these healthy habits kind of going forwards to maintain, because you're a cancer survivor forever, and I think it's one of those things you need to always bear in mind. I imagine, Nicky, it's not something that you can put in a box and forget about. It's an experience. Every time you see the video, you feel quite emotional about it.
Before and after, life is, it will never be the same again.
It will never be the same again.
But you just want to put yourself in the best possible place to survive and be healthy going forward.
And I think that's the amazing thing, is you've almost used that experience to then kind of really charge into the future in a sort of really healthy and positive way, which I think is phenomenally important.
And Athos as well, it kind of almost puts the why behind what we do.
Adam, I think emotional is probably the right word. Nicky, I think you're super brave. I think that the positive impact that this can make to other people's lives is not to be underestimated. And I've been fortunate to be part of this company, as we were talking about earlier, for a long time. And we have this purpose, and it's something that we buy into and we believe in. But when you actually see this so viscerally and powerfully, kind of makes me really proud to be part of this business and this industry. Because I think what we do is important.
And we said at the beginning, Athos, didn't we, that the proposition is expanding. I think Nicky's story kind of brings that to life, the reason why it's expanding. But obviously there needs to be some sort of kind of moderation and consideration of making sure that those price increases and the cost of the proposition is sustainable. So how do we navigate this?
I think that we've spoken a lot about that, and I think it talks about the way we use technology. I think it talks about the clinical appropriateness of the treatments that we do utilize and how we get people to them at the right times. And I think it talks about our ability to ensure that all of those things collide to deliver for our members. I do think, though, and it's an aside from cost containment and financial management, but I do think it's so important that we remain humble, we remain empathetic, we remain connected to our customers and to our members, that we listen carefully to them, that we act appropriately, because through all of this, I think that's been the most humbling and gratifying thing here today, is that in some way we've achieved that, but we can do more. And for me, that's the thing that I'd like us to focus on as a business going forward, is how do we make those experiences in the worst possible times as delightful as they can be.
And Nicky, any final thoughts from you?
Yeah, just as a customer, I mentioned earlier on, I've always bought and made my private health decisions based on price. So, I would like to people to realise what you get with Vitality is worth the extra money. So it made my whole experience so much easier than friends who've gone through the same experience.
And you can't put a price on it.
You can't put a price on that, no.
Providing you can afford it.
It's not just the journey, it's now. My mental state now is great. So thank you to Vitality.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us so far. We're not finished yet. We are going to be joined with our panellists for a live Q&A discussion. We're also going to be joined by the CEO of Alvi Health as well, one of our partners who we've talked about a fair bit today. So please stay tuned, get your questions in, and we will see you in just a moment to answer your questions live. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. We are now live to answer your questions. Hope you've enjoyed the discussion so far. We've got Athos, Dr. Katie Tryon, Nick Lipczynski, and Nicky with us, and also a new joiner, Krishna. Thank you for joining us. Please, could you quickly give us some introduction of who you are? You're the founder of Alvi. We've talked a lot about Alvi today already. So yeah, please give us a quick overview of who you are.
Good morning, Adam. Thanks for inviting me here. My name is Krishna Murthy. And yes, I'm a founder of Alvi Health that provides digital wraparound holistic care for people undergoing cancer treatment. I'm also a consultant surgeon at Imperial College. I specialize in cancers of the esophagus and the stomach. And Alvi very much was born out of my own personal experience as a surgeon and having seen, I don't know how many thousands of patients undergo cancer treatment and seeing the impact of cancer treatment on their lives. I found the webinar, especially Nicky's piece, so inspirational yesterday because, Nicky proactively took control of her health because once you're diagnosed with cancer and you start suffering the symptoms and side effects of treatment, I've seen people's physical fitness deconditioned, their nutrition compromised, and we know through research that all this impacts on cancer outcomes. So it was really inspirational to see how Nicky took control of her own health to give ourselves the best chance of getting the best outcome out of cancer treatment.
Thanks, Krishna. And yeah, I completely agree. I think hearing from Nicky firsthand has been really, really powerful. So yeah, thanks again for joining us all. And please do get your questions in. We're seeing lots of questions coming through. The first question I'd like to ask to you, Nick. We've talked a lot today about the expansion of the proposition, obviously some of the utilization cost pressures alongside medical inflation, obviously a big topic in the market at the moment. But from an intermediary's point of view, how do you best have that conversation with clients? So just to ensure that they are aware of what they're receiving in line with some of the challenges we're seeing in the market.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in the industry over 30 years, and in the last 2 years, we've seen very strong pressure on cost. And that definitely has been a challenge for us in talking with corporates. It's using the data, it's using the management information that is available to get across to clients the value that they're actually getting from their insurance. And as I said in the on the webinar, that effectively Nicky's stories is one that helps very much visualize and bring to life what people are experiencing, and that is the value of the insurance. So it's communicating that with the information we have, but taking it away from sort of bland information to making it more real, more effective in terms of the story it tells. So I think that's the key thing for us. It's make it real, let clients understand exactly what the insurance is for and what it does to people pre-op, post-op, recovery, back at work. All these things are very important. So I think it's about getting that message across as much as we can.
Yeah, and we've got a question coming about sort of post-treatment support. We'll turn to that in a minute, but sticking with cost briefly, if that's okay, Athos. Andrew, a broker himself, has asked, what sort of metrics are we using to come to the figures that we're seeing at pricing renewal? And do you see the market premium in the future continue to rise at this rate? So, we've obviously discussed quite a lot today, the mechanisms in place to try and contain cost and ensure that we're getting to clients earlier, we're supporting them in the best way possible to improve the chances of a positive outcome. But what are some of the things that we're using to measure the cost of the premium increase?
Adam, I think that the first thing to acknowledge is this last period of 2 or 3 years has been a very unique period for private medical providers across the country. I think that the circumstances that we found ourselves in as a healthcare system broadly has been unique. Post-COVID acceleration of some of the trends that we saw coming pre-COVID have put us in quite a difficult position in terms of how we evolve our proposition, the way we manage the costs within that, and the types of benefits that we need to provide at the scale of that provision. So if we think about what that shape looked like 5 years ago, we were very much a provision of catastrophe type care and the ability to get ahead of a queue, really. Whereas today, we're both the first port of call in terms of primary care, but also being called upon more to deliver things like cancer care, where the NHS has found itself under pressure. So the circumstances have significantly changed, and the increases have been driven by that change because the risk premiums that Vitality and our peer group had expected were not in line with the actual claims experience that we then found ourselves needing to fund. So there has been this period of catch up to get to a parity position where your risk funding and your claims exposure are on parity. I do think that we've reached a place of much more stability and predictability, and I would imagine that not only ourselves but generally across the industry, we should find a slowdown in the rate of inflation, which would then be linked back to medical inflation as it has been in previous years. So I think that there should be a position of less volatility coming down the line. Having said that, I think it is important that we acknowledge that harnessing technology and being much smarter about the way we route our members to the most appropriate clinical care and therefore clinical outcomes is critical in stabilizing and maintaining that cost. So I'm sorry, it's a bit of an academic approach to the answer, but it is a complex question, and I think to be very clear, it's an industry style question that we need to address. I think Katie may be able to speak in a bit more detail to directionality and ensuring that we get the right clinical care to the right place as quickly as possible and eliminate wastage, because that's part of cost containment. I think at Vitality specifically, we're in a really strong position around that.
And Nick made a really great point on the webinar discussion earlier that actually it's about taking a medium to long term approach here and not a short term approach. It's kind of the sort of thing you're saying, isn't it, Athos?
Yeah, and I think it's absolutely about getting across the work you need to do now about improving the health and well-being of employees. You know, we know that, and it's so obvious and logical that what we do now is going to have a beneficial effect in the future, and I can never see anybody ever arguing against that nowadays. It's blindingly obvious, but what we have to do is make sure then the insurance is fit for purpose for invariably what is going to happen to people. You know, Nicky's story is one of those where she's so focused on health and well-being beforehand, but there is no guarantee over what's going to happen to you. But the stronger and fitter you are, the better you are to deal with that, and that in itself has a cost. It improves, it reduces the cost because your recovery is better and the aftercare is better. So all of this is self-obvious, and this is what people should really be embracing, I would say.
Nick, sorry, Adam, if I could just jump in on that point. I think that point you're making around prevention is so critical, and we're seeing the evidence of that from so many different credible sources, including the WHO and the UN, where the percentage of spend on prevention by nations around the world has been lagging, and the more preventative medicine we can practice, and the better we can go into things like cancer treatment, the better we can come out of them. And then to Krishna's point around how Nicky grabbed hold of her wellness, I think is such a valuable point to make. And from our perspective, making those interventions easily accessible, both from a convenience perspective and a cost perspective, is critical.
Anything to add, Katie, from a clinical perspective to anything that's been said?
Yeah, I mean, I think interestingly there were some news articles this morning, and I don't know if others saw them, but I think where we're thinking about prevention, I think it's really important to think about the kind of 3 steps of prevention. So, we talk a lot about primary prevention, and we talked a lot about that earlier in terms of doing all the right things, physical activity before you've got a condition, getting your physical activity in, quitting smoking, etc. Then secondary prevention is all about screening and early identification. So really thinking through, how do we help people and facilitate people in the way that we have done with things like our Check for Cancer, cancer risk assessment, discounted cancer screens, those sorts of things, getting early. But I do think then the third one is around tertiary prevention, which is around once you've been diagnosed with a condition, how do you then improve your overall health to reduce the sequelae or the consequences of that condition? And that's why I think it's wonderful that we've got Krishna here, because that's been a huge part of our partnership with Alvi to really help and support people through their cancer journey. And as I kind of referenced earlier, in a wonderful way, with survival in the way that it is, those cancer journeys are getting longer. We are having people living with that condition for substantially longer. And I think it's really important to remember that tertiary cancer piece. And I don't know if people saw the news this morning, but there was quite a lot of media attention around the benefits of physical activity while you're going through cancer treatment. And I think it's really important to think about that element. And then very much to Nicky's point, then continuing on that journey after the shorter term piece around your cancer treatment, but then continuing on that health and well-being journey. So I think it's brilliant that we've got Krishna in here to really talk about that tertiary piece as well.
Indeed, and we're getting a few questions coming in around what sort of holistic support is available for someone going through a cancer claim. Even questions coming in about those in remission. We'll come to that shortly. But Krishna, from your side, a whole load of clinical evidence, research, clinical backed science goes into the Alvi program. So please, could you dig into that tertiary sort of third stage of prevention for us a little bit? And then Nicky, off the back of that, it'd be great to hear from you, as well, from the point of view of someone who's actually been through it.
We've talked a lot about, prehabilitation and rehabilitation, in cancer pathways. And the term prehabilitation, it's not a new concept, but essentially it's about proactively identifying where the health impairments would be and then providing targeted interventions. And Katie, just to echo what you said, just because it's not like once you got the cancer, you can stop your preventative strategies, because those same strategies are linked to every step of the cancer pathway. So, for example, what we essentially do is we screen patients for various different things like psychological impairments, physical impairments, frailty, multimorbidity, a whole bunch of things. And based on that, we build a risk stratification and a risk profile. And then we provide very targeted interventions for people who might be frail, a little bit more fitness type of coaching, for people who need nutritional support, more dietetic support, etc. Because not everybody needs everything. And also remember, this is all behavior change at a very challenging time. There are many people who've been diagnosed with cancer. We know 40% of cancers are because of lifestyle and behavioral problems. So we already got this cohort of people who find behavior change very challenging. And they've just been diagnosed with cancer. They've got the side effects of treatment going on. And then you ask them to change behavior. So it's not easy. People like Nicky, I would say, are the fantastic exception. Because most people, they do need, as Athos said, we need to be able to make this accessible to people, because not everybody is like Nicky. They need some support through this whole process. So that's what we do. We bring in targeted specialists to people just when they need it in a very proactive manner. We don't allow health deterioration like weight loss to occur while you're on chemotherapy and sarcopenia. And doing all this, the evidence is building, Adam. There's so much of evidence that improving cardiorespiratory fitness for people on chemotherapy results in lower A&E attendances and hospitalizations. There's so much of evidence it improves tolerance to chemotherapy. And the most remarkable thing we find is that even from a quality of life perspective, people on chemotherapy usually report a deterioration in quality of life, which is to be expected. But when you do programs which are, like Alvi or prehabilitation, even if it's hospital-based, or as Nicky went into see a personal trainer, regardless of where the intervention is delivered, you find that even in people on chemotherapy, they report better quality of life. And by doing that, we can actually support working age people to stay at work and not leave work. So I think this is a very important field that's emerging. And even in the NHS, a lot of people are adopting prehabilitation programs into cancer pathways.
And Krishna, from an outcome point of view, is there a line that could be drawn between the sorts of things you just spoke about, better quality of life, more respiratory activity? What sort of evidence can we show for how that improves outcomes?
So there are lots of publications, Adam, that show that the reduction in post-operative complications in people undergoing major cancer surgery, there's an improvement in the tolerance to chemotherapy, more people likely to finish their chemotherapy as planned, reduced hospital stay, and better quality of life does translate. If you look at our whole healthcare system, we do measure quality of life as a marker of the efficiency of our treatments as well, using incremental cost effectiveness ratios. So if you do improve quality of life, there is a certain cost benefit associated with that. And I think that's what we also need to appreciate of the healthcare system, is that just improving people's quality of life is not a soft metric. It can be a hard metric, because especially in today's world, we can improve productivity in cancer people as well, because we do know that productivity in cancer patients does get impaired after cancer diagnosis. So there's a lot of research. And in terms of thresholds, Adam, probably not, but we do know that improving your physical fitness by 10% can result in better tolerance to chemotherapy and reduction in post-op complications. We do know that if you prevent sarcopenia from occurring from proactive physical interventions, you can, again, improve tolerance to chemotherapy. The most fascinating thing, again, from a survivorship perspective, is there's been some really good research that shows that just increased physical activity, there's a dose-response relationship between physical activity and survival after breast and colorectal cancer. So the higher the dose of daily physical activity, the higher the likelihood of long-term survival.
Wow, Krish, I mean, I find that mind-blowing. There's some, and Nicky, you've been nodding away there. This is kind of something that is very close to you and your experience.
Yeah.
But yeah, from a first-hand experience point of view, I mean, you talked a lot about during the discussion about the mindset that you needed to be able to get through the treatment that you had. But what Krishna's kind of overview there kind of tells me is that it just brings to life how all these things are so interconnected.
Yeah, I wouldn't have known any of this information, though, as a cancer patient until I was called by my Alvi consultant, who talked me through nutrition, talked me through the importance of physical exercise. And you have a choice at this point. You can either, just get on with it from a daily basis, or you can be proactive and actually go out there and try and improve the outcome. And I had a personal trainer. I went to the Genesis Clinic in Milton Keynes. So I had 24 personal training sessions once a week, and they were tailored to fit into my chemo treatment. So, one day if I couldn't tolerate the exercise, we would change the date for my exercise. So it was very much tailored to me on a very personal level of treatment. So that made a massive difference. And you can't control what you're doing. So this is the one thing that you can do. You can take a positive approach. And, I did get through it. And there were days where I felt really, really awful. But carrying on walking, going to the gym really, really helped.
It's the knowledge, isn't it? And having someone hold your hand through it that makes the difference, it seems. Jamal has asked, and hopefully we've just answered this question, is personal training part of the cancer claim process? So yeah, in this case, yes, through Alvi. Other questions coming through around the sort of support that cancer claimants get during remission. Krisha, support isn't included within Alvi for those who have been through treatment, but from a vitality perspective, we do have the vitality program. I mean, Nicky, for example, how have you used the vitality program post your recovery?
I think it's a habit, isn't it? You form a habit and then it carries on. So, it encourages you to continue exercising, to be mindful about what you eat. I also have really regular screening, which you probably wouldn't get as much screening as I get now on the NHS. So my mammograms will continue. So I've got that reassurance going forward that I'm being checked every year. And yeah, I will still engage with the Vitality program. So there's small changes in your life that then become long-term changes and long-term habits.
Those nutritional changes, using things like Headspace, hopefully more integrated into your everyday life, and if you needed them, they're there, right, and or embedded on a daily basis. Another question came in, I think is an interesting one around Pilates. In the Vitality program, there is the Live Brave program available, so that provides access. The question is around, is there any way to help that kind of could that be used as an incentive? At present, no, it's not something that's being used from a kind of incentive based point of view in terms terms of premium or points, but there is access. But Katie, from a clinical perspective and a health point of view, Pilates, I mean, I can imagine that's really beneficial to someone going through a cancer diagnosis or those looking to stand their best chances of preventing it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what I would say is, as part of the program, the reason why it's not included at the moment, and I say that at the moment, we're constantly looking at innovation and development, is not to do with the fact that we don't recommend it as being a fantastic tool or mechanism. It's more to do with the fact that the Vitality program is based on verifiable activity, right? So steps, heart rate, things that you can monitor in a relatively easy way with limited, amount of equipment. And that's really one of the challenges that we have, is around monitoring and measuring in terms of things that we would call more functional fitness, so the likes of Pilates, yoga, etc. It's not that from a clinical perspective we don't recommend them. I think they have enormous health benefits, and that's why we have the partnership with Live Brave, and we do encourage that sort of activity. But we are challenged, at least at the moment, in terms of the verifiability of activity in order to specifically award points for it.
Yeah. But it's very good for us, though.
It's fantastically good. It's not there because we don't think that it's wonderful for people's health. It's more to do with the technical issues around verifiability of activity.
Yeah. And Athos, we've got about 5 minutes left, and I'm going to answer as many questions as I possibly can before we have to sign off. But Athos, the questions come in around exclusions. So, for example, if let me just grab the question because it's no longer in front of me. I apologise. If a client has made a cancer claim in the past, so this one's about access to personal trainer and nutritional support as part of their plan. Just a quick question, more of a technical one, around the wraparound care that you get through Alvi. That would be specifically to those that are claiming through Vitality, as opposed to someone that has an historic cancer claim. The nod to telling me that that's the case. Around exclusions, is there an exclusion period for those who've taken out cover within the last couple of years? Maybe one for you, Athos.
So, I think that underwriting exclusions are very particular and specific to individual cases, and it also depends, Adam, on where in the spectrum you are. So, for example, in Nick's world, if you were part of a 500-man company and there'd been a cancer claim previously, it would be an entirely different question and acceptability than if you were an individual member and that cancer was in the immediate past. Then absolutely there would be exclusions applied. Whereas in the larger type of environment, so they wouldn't. So it depends on scheme size. It depends on the frequency or the duration from cancer to date, etc. It's a very difficult question to answer with a single brush.
Yes, very much done on a case by case basis.
Indeed.
And also a question here about for corporate clients or business healthcare plans. Do Vitality provide in-depth management information to intermediaries in respective business healthcare plans? And Athos, I'm sure you'll have a view, and Nick as well, from firsthand at the coalface.
Yeah, I can come in. In fact, I would suggest that Vitality are effectively the cutting edge of providing a whole load of data, not just on the corporate claims, but on the Vitality engagement itself. And those two go together. So what you get on large corporate clients is very detailed, very regular, useful information that tries to bring an element of reality to the figures you're talking about. Can I just say one thing, because it's occurred to me, from all the stuff that Krishna and Katie's talking about, from all these interventions, the one thing that strikes me about Nicky is, can you somehow bottle this positive mental attitude? Is there somewhere, Nick and Katie, that you can get that? Because with all the things that Krishna and yourselves provide, none of this matters unless you have that mental attitude. And I'm just so admiration for Nicky that you can do that. There's some, I wish you could bottle it and give it to people, because that is, to me, the main thing of this whole webinar, is the way you approach all of this. And that is so motivating. It really is. Just wanted to say that.
Adam, just on the question, the previous question, and I see James Eisted has just popped in a question or a comment into the chat. There are obviously certain levels of information that we can and can't provide in terms of how data protection and confidentiality needs to be approached. So where you're dealing with large schemes, we're dealing with aggregate data, and that's absolutely fine. As you get to smaller and smaller schemes, if you're dealing with a 4-person scheme and you're divulging that one of those 4 people had a cancer claim, that's obviously clearly in breach of the confidentiality, which we will always respect. So there are, James, some of those challenges around to what level we can and can't provide data. But certainly from an engagement type of perspective, we're getting better at that. There in fact is a new format which we've released a number of months back now, which gives better insight into engagement. But certainly from a clinical perspective, there are very hard cutoffs there.
Brilliant. Thanks, Athos. We're out of time, unfortunately. One last kind of comment from Annette around kind of how to assist clients with access to Calvi when it comes to dealing with claims. So maybe just a quick mention of kind of like where people can find out more, whether they're encountering a claim or just if they want to find out more information about the Alvi program and any other health insurance propositions that we provide.
Adam, maybe just before we close off, and it's stating the obvious, but there are many more questions that have come in that we've been unable to answer. If they are in the chat, we will endeavour to answer them. If you've not put them in the chat and you have questions that you'd like to ask us, would you please just email us directly, and we'll ensure that we respond to every single question that comes in. They're always valuable. Questions, suggestions, compliments, complaints. We're happy to take them all because that helps us to be better at what we do. So thank you so much for joining us and for your inputs.
Yeah, thanks, Athos. Yeah, just to echo that, thanks to everyone for joining us today and staying with us for the whole duration. Special thank you to Nicky for joining us and Krishna for also jumping on the live Q&A, and to our panelists, Katie, Nick and Athos. I hope you've enjoyed the discussion as much as I have at home or at work, wherever you are. See you next time on Forward Thinking, and take care.